with another hat on, I'm a director of a grant-making charity, I think, called the Thames Water Trust Fund, which does a similar thing. It gives grants to people in severe need. So I know how much charities that do this work and grants, how important it is. So it really is a pleasure to be here. And it's also a pleasure to be called an illustrious expert, which I've certainly never been called before and have on my screensaver. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about debt today. So this sort of, the myth is that if you take out loans and get into debt, it's your own fault. So what I'm going to do is give you a sort of super quick tour, looking at who's struggling with debt right now, why it matters that we do something about it, how it happens that people get into debt, and try and think a little bit about what we can do about it. Are there some solutions to this? So who's struggling with debt right now? Well, we reckon there's about 2.6 million people struggling with severe problem debt at the moment. This is a number that's remained stubbornly high. Go back to, say, 2013, and it was about 2.9 million. So even though we've seen dramatic falls in unemployment since the sort of tail end of the recession, even though we've started to see, at least for some households, an end in the long squeeze in household income where we had income growth below inflation, debt levels in the UK have remained stubbornly high, very, very sticky. So debt matters. It matters because of the number of people it currently touches. This vast number, 2.5 million, another 8 million people in sort of moderate financial difficulties who are maybe on the edge of falling into debt, and a little push in the wrong direction and they will fall down that slope. But it also matters because of the terrible damage that debt can cause. Half of people who come to help to Step Change Debt Charity tell us that before seeking debt advice, they'd sought treatment from a GP or hospital for debt-related mental or physical health problems. So debt creates huge problems with health. 2% clients told us that the stress of debt led to them losing their job. You scale that up to those 2.6 million people, and that's 50,000 people on the dole because of debt. Nearly 6 in 10 parents said that debt problems put their relationship under strain, 7% saying that their relationship broke up because of debt. 9 in 10 families in problem debt said they've had to cut back on essentials like food, clothing and heating for their children in order to keep up with their debt repayments. And children in households experiencing problem debt are more than twice as likely to say they've been bullied at school than children that aren't in indebted households. So none of our clients wanted to get into debt. No one wants to get into debt. Debt can affect anyone. The most common reasons why we see people falling into debt is because of an income shock, a big change in circumstances that undermines people's ability to make ends meet. Around 14 million people experienced such a shock in the last 12 months. And those that did experience an income shock made up almost 3/4 of the people who are in problem debt. Now, debt can happen to anyone, but it is patterned. It's more likely to happen and to touch upon households in lower and middle incomes and those in insecure jobs. People working 0-hour contracts, temporary, part-time jobs were twice as likely to experience an income shock as those that don't. And I guess our experience of debt with Nicola's graphs of people below, sort of households without 2 adults in full employment, then those graphs are kind of looking at employment and minimum incomes map very well onto our clients in terms of people who are in households or who have don't have so much employed income for a variety of reasons, are much more likely to be in debt. So the shocks are causing people fall into debt, but the way that people are able to cope with these shocks is what really matters. Now, we know that levels of financial resilience in the UK are low. There's 22 million people say they're not confident that they're saving enough for a rainy day. So when that shock comes along, people don't have things to fall back on. They don't always have the resources to cope. And this is true of lower income households in particular. The benefit safety net doesn't always fill the gaps, as we've heard. So about 6.5 million of those people who experienced an income shock turn to credit as a way of coping. There will be credit cards, overdrafts, also things like payday loans. They're using credit to keep up with essentials, and then they're using more credit to try and keep up with their existing credit commitments, juggling, desperately trying to keep on top and keep their heads above water. The bigger those credit commitments get, the harder it is to cope. This credit safety net very quickly becomes a debt trap. Now, we think this could be avoided if people got better help at the right time. 80% of our clients said that they'd contacted one or more of their creditors to ask for help when they started experiencing financial difficulties. But the kind of help that people need, things like a freeze on interest or charges or a halt on collection to give people a bit of space to get their finances together, was often not given. And where creditors didn't help, none of our clients said their financial situation stabilised. Instead, many said their debt problems got worse. 6 in 10 took out more credit to try and cope with their financial difficulties. 21% took out a payday loan. 29% said that an aggressive action by a creditor prompted them to pay that creditor but fall behind on other bills. So without that right help, people get into this vicious cycle where the debts are getting bigger and the hardship's getting deeper. So, if people take out loans and get into debt, is it their own fault? No. Yes, people are making decisions all the time to deal with the problems that they face. And sometimes these are not always good decisions. Using payday loans to try and manage your budget from one month to the next is often disastrous. It seems a bad decision with the benefit of hindsight. But when people don't have enough income to make ends meet and have very few resources to fall back on, good choices are few and far between. And over the last few years, loans and even payday loans have only been half the problem. We've seen a huge rise in things like council tax, rent arrears, gas and electricity debts. So it's not just loans that we're seeing. People's ability to make ends meet and the financial pressure households are under are meaning we're seeing more and more people falling behind on even the basic, everyday, essential bills. So, think about the answers. There isn't an easy answer. Debt is multifaceted. There isn't one single way of dealing with it. Here are some of the thoughts that we're sort of thinking about it now. Firstly, we think people in financial difficulty need a much better guarantee of help. Proper protection from spiralling debts and creditor pressure that will give them the breathing space they need to get their finances under control. So we've been asking the government to introduce a new statutory scheme that will help people recover and encourage them to seek debt advice earlier, rather than using coping strategies that are ultimately destructive. We need to think hard about how we can increase the financial resilience of households and lower income working households in particular. The recent announcement of a new Help to Save scheme that will try and boost rainy day funds for universal credit claimants is a welcome step in the right direction, but there is a lot more to do. We need to ensure that creditors play fair and that the products they sell do not have harm built into them. The Financial Services Regulator, the Financial Conduct Authority, needs to keep focused on breaking the link we see between bad practice by credit firms and problem debt. And it's not just credit, it's other creditors as well. Central and local government are often the worst creditors and show some of the worst practices we see. And they seriously need to pick their game up. Finally, we need to think about safety nets that do a much better job of supporting people through hard times. Leaving people with no option but using expensive and ultimately harmful credit is a very bad place for public policy to be. Thank you.